My name is Terrell Williams, and I serve as the Associate Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Office of Admission here at MIT Sloan. I'll also serve as tonight's moderator for our panel. I'm really excited about this opportunity to host this panel that talks about the partners and families of Sloan. One that I definitely connect with as somebody who traveled here with a significant other and recently had a child in the last 9 months. So I'm going to check and see if in the chat to see if our other panelists is here, but I'll pass it over to Amber and Chris to kick us off.
All right. Hi, everybody. This is Amber and Chris calling from Somerville, Massachusetts. I'll start off and then I'll hand it over to Chris. So my name is Amber. I was the Sloanie that brought us out here to Massachusetts. My parents are immigrants from Peru. I was born and raised in California, and prior to graduate school, I spent about 5.5 years in the social sector working for a statewide foundation in California called the Latino Community Foundation, where I managed our Latino Giving Circle network. That's actually where Chris and I met. Chris was extremely involved in volunteering with our organization, and we met that way. Around in 2020 was when I really got the itch to go back to graduate school. I was really looking for an opportunity to go to really, I guess, level up my professional toolkit and provide and build a more data-driven approach to the work that I was doing. And that's what ultimately brought me to MIT for my MBA. And as Terrell mentioned, I'm actually also the one that did the dual degree program. So in my first semester at Sloan, I applied to the dual degree program and I did my MPA, my Master's in Public Administration, at the Harvard Kennedy School. And so we've been here for 3 years. I'm class of 23 for MIT Sloan and class of 24 for the Harvard Kennedy School with my MPA. I'm excited to chat a little bit more about that for folks that are interested. But yeah, I loved my time at Sloan. I was the class president, one of the class presidents and that's how much I loved it. I wanted to give back to the community and get as involved as possible, both working with the student body and the faculty and staff like Terrell. So I'll pass it off to Chris and I can answer more questions later.
How's it going, y'all? Chris Torres, spouse, first gentleman of Sloan, I guess, for a short amount of time. Was very excited to come out to Boston for her program. I think we learned a ton. Excited to give y'all a little bit of the SO, the significant other experience. So if anyone has questions or bringing partners. We also recently just welcomed our firstborn into the world. So at 10 months old, Amber also did the parent thing while completing those crazy programs. So we can talk a little bit about that. And then a little bit about me. I'm a product manager at Google. So I was able to move to the Boston office and navigate the career transitions that came with the location transfer and everything else. But yeah, looking forward to the conversation tonight.
Awesome. So it looks like our other panelists are not in the chat, but one thing we do well here at Sloan is pivot. So we can definitely have more conversations. So I can butt in as a moderator and be able to kind of share my experience as somebody on the staff side that came here with a significant other, as well having a child within the last year. So I do want to kick us off with our first question. Amber and Chris, can you just kind of talk about that thought process of like ultimately going back to school and what attracted you to Sloan's MBA program?
Yeah, so I think for me, I touched on this a little bit in my intro. I was hoping my background was really in project management, stakeholder partnerships and all of that, and storytelling. And what I kind of was feeling at the end of my professional experience with the foundation that I was at was that I really wanted to bring in that more data-driven approach to my work. And so that's why the MIT Sloan MBA became very attractive to me. Cheryl, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe our MBA is a technical MBA, given the course requirements that we have to take. And that for me, on one hand, was extremely scary because it was very different from anything I had ever done. But on the other hand, that's exactly the challenge that I wanted. On a personal note, having been born and raised in California, I did travel a lot, but had never lived on the East Coast. And so around the time that I was applying for programs, Chris and I get engaged. We're more seriously thinking about our future. And as we're planning out the next couple of years in life, I'm like, this is probably going to be the only time we can live farther away from where our families are. And so that was something else that attracted me to this area. And I was interested in the dual degree program with the Harvard Kennedy School, given my previous professional background. And so the opportunity to do that at these two amazing institutions for me was really attractive. And during my admit weekend, I remember when I was deciding across different programs, I asked the person who was my facilitator, the student, I was like, okay, so really like culture is important to me. Like, what's the culture like at Sloan? And he said, well, I think the admissions team just does a really good job of weeding out any assholes. And I was like, ha ha ha, that's so funny. But honestly, being here on the campus, I think one of the things that I loved about being at Sloan is like you have such amazing individuals that have done ridiculous things in their career, really impressive things, but folks that you would meet are genuinely really humble. And everybody, we have a saying at Sloan, Sloanie's helping Sloanies. And that's something that you feel across, like from adamant weekend to your first day on campus. You genuinely feel everybody's intent to support one another. And that for me was really important, especially going back to graduate school after being working for so long.
Thank you for sharing that. So, Chris, now I want to pass it over to you in terms of like the significant other experience. So, could you kind of shed some light on like how does Sloan ensure that partners and families from diverse backgrounds feel included and supported as their significant other is going through the program?
I mean, I can honestly say like it's extremely welcoming, even more than just any expectations. I think early on, after, even through the whole admit process, I think we were in sessions with other, couples and partners that were coming. So we got a little bit to know, in advance what it would be like. But while we were on campus, extremely welcoming. I had my own kind of partner ID, like official MIT ID. I got access to the libraries. The
Jim.
partners, the gym, the partners can access all of the clubs, which to me felt like I was getting a mini MBA because they had like, what is the crypto club at MIT doing at this time? You want to be on the forefront of some of the biggest topics out there. And if you get to go to some of these talks and some of these meetings, that was huge. I also joined the intramural sports. So I had, joined the hockey team. I have like my own Sloan hockey jersey. Really proud of that one. But super, super inclusive. I'm a bit biased from what I like to say is the other liberal arts school that's down the way from MIT. And having the blessing of being of her in both programs, it's night and day kind of the
Yeah.
experience. MIT extremely open, extremely collaborative. The fact that I got access to anything was a blessing. I think the other schools out there are not as welcoming, and to call out names, Harvard is really not anywhere near the level of openness that MIT is. So I was really grateful.
Thank you for sharing that, Chris. And I have a quick follow-up that I saw within the chat that I thought was pretty relevant. You mentioned something about your job allowing you to, transfer locations. Somebody mentioned like they're a little nervous about that. So can you kind of shed some light on like how you navigated that process of, requesting that transfer?
Yeah, I can't say there's really silver bullets there. I think there were a couple of perfect storm items that made it happen for us. The fact that this was during COVID, world was kind of shut down when she was applying. Everything went remote, for a hot second there. I think that gave me an opening to be able to move easily. I will say I started conversations really early with my manager. And I imagine everyone's going through the application process. If everyone could pick MIT, I'm sure they would. But at a certain time, we didn't know where we could end up. And so I was talking to my manager. We could end up in Boston. We could end up in, any of these cities in the US. I just tried to get it out there early that I was planning on moving. I was planning on kind of following Amber where she went. Um, and so I kept that kind of open communication. Um, COVID helped out a little bit in terms of making things a bit more fluid. But it did help that we already had an office here. I already had some of my cross-functional team stakeholders that were in this office, and I was able to make that happen. So early communication was really big on that. A little bit of opportunity in terms of what other teams I was working with. But I was also prepared to kind of make a really big job switch within the company. So I was also looking at some roles as it came down to shorter and shorter school lists to make it happen. So I'm glad Boston made it happen. But I was prepared for a little bit tougher conversations as well.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that. So, Amber, I want to pass it back over to you as it pertains like the curriculum of Sloan and the curriculum of HKS, kind of being able to balance that, but also being a significant other. Can you talk about the core semester and like that transition period for you as you're transitioning back into school, but having a significant other there with you and like, navigating that process and maybe how you leaned on Chris for support during that particular time, maybe outside of your cohort?
Yeah, it was rough. I think I really struggled my first month and just learning how to be a student again. And again, coming from the social sector, the curriculum for me was completely different because I just hadn't been exposed to a lot of what for some people were basic terms. It was like learning a new language and then learning the curriculum alongside that for me. Um, but that's where I'm saying the Sloanie's helping Sloanie's part was so critical to my support. I was very transparent with my core team. So that group of like 7 people that I was paired up with about my initial insecurities and also my strengths. And I was like, hey, y'all, this is what I'm going to be really good at for our team. And this is what I'm definitely really nervous about and I might struggle with. And I can tell you in the classes that I was more nervous about, like my core team members that like they had professionally done like statistics and data modeling, they were like, oh, here, just sit next to me and I'll explain everything to you while we're in class. Or they would sit after with all of us and they would explain the model and how they built that and why it worked. And so that was extremely supportive in terms of getting me the support that I needed within that core semester. As a core team, we didn't do it super often. We did it twice, I think, where we met out of the 7 of us, I think 4 had partners and 3 did not. And so we would have like these big dinners where we would all come together and meet and chat so that our partners felt like they were a part of that also. And then on a personal note, I think once I did get into my MBA curriculum and into my MBA program and knew that I was going to have a very busy semester, in July before I started, I actually booked a trip for Chris and I in upstate New York, like a surprise trip. I just put it on our calendar, like surprise trip. It was like the weekend of October 15th, of my first year. And I did that because I said, okay, at that point I would have been in school for 2 months. And so I want to make sure that I'm committing like I have no idea what it's going to be like. Chris kept joking, like, you're going to ignore me and you're going to be busy all the time with all your with all your new friends. But I think for me, it was also important to try and create that one-on-one time with each other to make sure that we were involved. But like Chris mentioned earlier, I think that the Sloanie community is so committed to just connect with one another that they were very welcoming to him for most of the events that we had.
And that's great. I know that balance is important as you're going through a program, making sure that you have enough time for your in-home life, but also within the school life and kind of balancing the social life here. One thing that I share with prospective students that are, thinking about, going to business school, may have a significant other, it's almost like a cheat code going back to school with another person because you can explore together. So I definitely like that aspect of, myself coming here with somebody else and being able to kind of explore the restaurants in the area or being able to just kind of go to the sporting events or being able to kind of interact with other, couples in the area. So I think that's pretty great that people are considering it, but just know that there's a community here that's pretty large for significant others. And kind of tying into that, like the social life. So outside of the class, like, was that hard to manage like the partner and family life with academics and networking? I know you just kind of touched on it. Like you said, having a surprise trip, but were there other examples that you can particularly highlight that, being the Senate co-president, that probably was, a lot of time on your hands to kind of balance that, but also being a partner. Like how was the social life aspect for you and Chris while you were in the program?
Yeah, let me I'll touch on the Sloan presidency because that was a lot. So I think as one does when you run for office, you have to discuss with your family. And so I actually did talk about it with Chris beforehand, more so because I was torn between 2 possible positions. But I think for me, it was important for me to chat with Chris about like what this opportunity could mean for me, what it would bring, knowing that it would take time away, not just from him, but also from the other commitments that I had made for myself during my graduate degree program. So I think that was really critical. I think also, but it also gave way for new opportunities in terms of like just new involvements, new access to different opportunities, different kinds of events, and that for me was equally as important. I always, for me, like my Sloan president experience was like having a mini internship of like executive management in a really awesome way. And I got to work really closely with my co-president, who had a very different professional background than I did and approached problems very differently than I did, which also was helpful. So yeah. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly the SO experience for me was purely social. I think like in many ways I got to join a lot of really interesting clubs, but it's not like I could leave work at 1 p.m. for a lot of the interesting conversations because they usually happen like during school hours. That said, you know, like I joined the Hispanic Business Club. A lot of that was, you know, networking, social, and connecting. I would say the social calendar for an MBA program, not only MIT, but definitely MIT, it is packed. If there are social things you want to do, it is constant. It is every day. You can go to as many things as you want. And so I think from that perspective, for us, it was really a pick or choose. You know, for her, it was like, oh, we can go to this talk, you know, this happy hour, this company's coming in and you know, hosting so and so. You know, and so for me personally, I mean, we were kind of strong enough. I was like, if you want to go, go ahead.
And vice versa.
And vice
Like
versa.
Chris went to a lot of
Yeah,
things that
there
I
were
didn't
things that
go
I went
to.
to that she didn't
So,
go to. And I
so
was like,
this is,
no, I
I
want to
think,
go to the
a big
thing.
part of
So,
it is literally we did not say
uh-huh.
yes to everything.
Yeah, so that's
There's
what I was gonna say was like at a certain point I was like I'm tapped out. Actually, you can go ahead and go. This is a little bit easier pre-kid, of course. But yeah, like I said to say like there is a lot going on, and I think like you know the MIT motto is like drinking from a fire hose. There is more than enough coming at you, whether it's academics or you know just the social aspect of it. That you can pick, you know, you can pick and choose. And I think you should probably start setting boundaries.
Yeah.
But I was really big, like for me coming to Boston, I also, you know, we came together. It's not like we came with a built-in friend group or social circle.
Yeah.
So I do want to turn back to like the core group that first semester. It was
Okay, cool.
huge. Like we had like a, you know, a small set of people who she was in every class with, also had partners. You know, we had those kind of dinners, and so we had like a good little small social group that expanded. And that kind of became my social group. So even as I was in a new city, um, you know, I also had kind of events to go to if I wanted to. I definitely started saying no more and more, but yeah, there's a lot to it. And I think we just, you know, we had to find our balance of what were the things that interested us. Yeah, like she said, some of those things I went to and she didn't even as a partner. So like I said, really welcoming for the partners even in a way that I did not expect. So
Yeah, and just quickly on the balance, I think the other thing too as a student is so much of the time, like even though you're socializing, a lot of these folks are also balancing the same schoolwork that you are. And so you all are there to kind of back each other up and support each other in the in between spaces. And there's a lot of like working on campus that happens, like getting together right after class that provides space to do that work collaboratively and then also have more free time later.
Awesome, awesome. So I see some questions in the chat that kind of, you know, are focusing on those who are parents. And I know we mentioned earlier that you finished was it the last semester at HKS? And you had just given birth?
Yeah, so I can
Mm.
walk through that timeline a little
Okay.
bit. So I was pregnant my last semester at Sloan. So
Mm.
like my key semester as president, I was pregnant, but I hadn't announced and like I graduated Sloan, nobody knew, but I was pregnant and my son walked with me. I gave birth in November of 2023. So that was my fall semester of my last year at the Harvard Kennedy School. So I gave birth about 2.5 weeks before the end of the semester. And then here in the Cambridge area, you don't have most people don't have classes on during the month of January. December's basically holiday break also. And so, or winter break. And so I had all of December, most of January off. So 2 months off, and then I went back to classes, and I finished out at HKS.
But and to kind of bring it, what kind of gave us an idea and implanted a seed is her one of her core team
Oh,
members,
yeah.
Bruce. They specifically tried to time their pregnancy around this period, and they knew
Their
that
first
going
year.
into fall semester, they were like going into fall semester, they already knew that they were going to try to try to start getting pregnant so that the baby came during that time. And at that time, when we were thinking about it, we were like, if your families and you guys are trying to plan out the babies timelines, like it's always tough. When's the right time? What are the right factors? What should we consider? And that was a really big part for us. Was like, do we wait till after she graduates? Do we wait till after she graduates plus a year and has like cemented herself and work a bit? But I do think, we had one of her core teammates, somebody super close, who was like, no, they had a baby already during that timeline. And so we also got to see a bit of their experience. And to be honest, I think it gave us a little bit more of a confidence to be able to do it ourselves. So
Yeah.
uh,
That being said, in that case, the student was the father and not the one who actually had to go through the childbirthing process.
yeah,
I do feel like for me it worked out because while I don't necessarily think 2 months I was ready to bounce back, it was a slow enough transition for me that I was able to manage the units that I had left with having a newborn at home. We also had our moms that were supporting us. And so all of that made all of that possible in a way that was sustainable for me.
a lot of help.
Yeah.
A lot of help.
We had a lot of help. And then when people offered, we're like, yes, thank you, please. So that was also a big part of it.
And when you all were going through that pregnancy journey, did you all take advantage of any of the resources that MIT had to offer as it pertains to maybe like childbirth classes or just like prep to get ready?
I feel like my first trimester was a blur because it was so busy with wrapping up. And so we didn't do any resources at Sloan. I also, again, had not shared that I was pregnant, so I didn't even look to see what resources there were. But I will say this area is fantastic. It's a fantastic parent community. I did use some resources at the Kennedy School, which is where I was like, I had already, I already had the baby. And so I used like the nursing rooms. I used some of the parent support systems that were there. But honestly, the best system has actually been, it's called the Camberville. There's a Camberville Facebook group. And so there's a Camberville parents and a Camberville moms. It's Cambridge, Somerville. We live in the Somerville area. Medford, like all basically the Boston area. And it's a Facebook group that you can join based on your child's birthing. They have different birthing ranges, and you can ask any types of questions. We're actually about to find our nanny through that avenue.
I think you also had a ton of friends who had babies. You had Bruce and them who had babies.
Oh, I did.
So we asked a lot of questions from current students who already had
children.
babies.
Like one of my best
And
friends,
so,
Stephanie,
like
came with a 3-year-old and was pregnant her last semester at
yeah, like
Sloan
it
also.
wasn't abnormal
Yeah.
to have a
Yeah, yeah,
baby.
yeah.
And I think like that was one of the bigger pieces that MIT brought, was like there were already families around. There were groups that organized around parents. There were like group chats that organized around parents.
Organize
And
events for
so,
kids.
yeah, like she has a mom group specifically with other Sloanies, a WhatsApp group. And so I think a really big part of it was like we had community who were in it together. Yeah, I think we were a little too late for the MIT specific resources, but the community itself, it was there.
Yeah, and I do want to add about the courses that MIT does have to offer, because I did take advantage of them when me and my wife were expecting. So MIT does offer like classes for new and expecting parents. So we did like a 6-week like prep course on like childbirth, like the whole process of like understanding what that's like. So we had a lot of MIT like students as well as staff within the room and kind of going through the process together. And that was pretty cool to kind of like relieve some of that anxiety of like, okay, what's
For
going to be
sure.
like within childbirth, but also having that resources ready, and it was actually free for us to do that. So I definitely appreciated that. And also MIT did have like some virtual classes too that you can attend if you didn't want to be in person because of where you were within that particular process. So they did have some virtual classes that pertain to like breastfeeding, and there was another class that talks about like there was like 4 stages of like a fussy baby. So I really like that. So that was helpful in terms of like preparing. And then like you mentioned, like trying to time it. So my daughter was actually born in December. So right before the beginning of the new year. So we were transitioning to like IEP for students. So we didn't have much going on as pertains to like student programming. So that was kind of ideal for me to kind of like have a month off. And then my wife was actually able to kind of have an extended period off with paternity leave. So Massachusetts was, phenomenal. I really am grateful we chose to move here because they are very progressive as it pertains to maternity leave and, making sure that there's also a paternity leave for those who are the non-birthing parents as well. So in that particular process for I guess transitioning with the baby, do you all know of any resources like for on-campus housing for those who are coming in with children, or those who are coming in with significant other? I know MIT does offer housing, but are you all familiar with those particular resources?
Um, well, Lucas was just saying, my core team member Bruce, he came with a 1.5-year-old, and then they had their child in January of our first year, and they lived in student campus housing, which so while we didn't use it ourselves, like I know that they used that, they loved it because it was close to a playground, it was close to campus, and that made it really really easy for them. But we don't know much more beyond that.
And I think
Understood.
that there was
Understood.
community around that also, like, because that's where most of the families were. And so I think that was, there was proximity in the families that were going through the similar things.
Yeah, but I will say, because I saw this question earlier, because somebody was worried about affordability coming. I think they were coming with 2 kids and 2 dogs. Where we live right now, Somerville, I would say there's a lot more space here. Like we have a small backyard. We have enough space for the 3 of us. And I think in this area, it gets a little bit more affordable and a little bit bigger. And so our friends that wanted a little bit more space did come out to Somerville. It's about 20 to 25 minutes door to door, taking public transit. It's even faster if you're bold and ride your bike like Chris does. I'm a scaredy cat, so I don't do that, but he loves riding his bike and he gets there quick, faster. And so yeah, there's definitely, if you're willing to go a little bit further, it does get a little bit more affordable out here in this area.
Yeah, I could attest to that. So with the public transit, so being able to kind of be on that red line will be beneficial because that gets you right to MIT Sloan. So if you're within the Kendall Square area, Central area, or even close to the Harvard Square, those are some good locations for people that have their children or looking to have a shorter commute versus living in the city, which could be a little challenging given the traffic situation here in the Boston area. So try to find something within, I guess, the respective bubble of MIT Sloan. There are
Yeah.
actually housing resources on our website that gives more students like opportunities to kind of research where areas are a little bit popular. Somerville is pretty popular, and then there's also some areas in the Central Square area that are pretty popular for students as well. And as Boston is a not a college town, but there are several higher education institutions here. A lot of students are moving out annually, so there's a
Yeah.
lot of spaces that open up for students to be able to kind of fill those particular voids. So there's always something available. Just to me, it depends on like how close you want to be or how far you want to be in that particular time frame. I know we're getting closer to time, but I do want to kind of pivot our conversation to more of the application process. So for those students that are applying or considering applying to graduate school in general, could you all just kind of share any advice for a prospective applicant as they're going through this process?
Ask as many people for support. I'm the first one in my friend group to get an MBA. I'm a first generation student. No one in my family had gotten an MBA before. And for first generation folks that are from underrepresented backgrounds here in the United States, you might have heard of programs like the Consortium Fellowship or MLT. I unfortunately was not a part of either of those as it relates to Sloan. But I know that those can be very helpful. I always say Chris was my MLT because he actually helped project manage my application process. And I'm not, it's where he's laughing, but it's true. Like he created the spreadsheet for me. He helped me set out deadlines for like when I needed to submit my application to one of my former colleagues used to work within Stanford admissions. And so she helped he helped me get stuff to all the people that were willing to support me in my process on time, and just do everything on time and make sure that I was getting everything out there as quickly as possible. So I think for me, the biggest piece of advice is use your support system as much as possible. Ask folks for help. I think especially when it comes to your admissions essays, it can really easily start to become really repetitive, or you're looking at it and you're like, nothing's wrong, or like, I don't know what else to fix. So just asking for pairs of fresh eyes to look it over, to support you, I think is extremely critical, because it is this tunnel vision that you kind of start getting into, especially as the deadlines start approaching.
And I do want to add that for those of you who are applying with your significant other, there are different indicators on their application as well, where you can indicate their name. So their name and which round they plan to apply as well. There was a question in the chat about what percentage of students are coming to our program with significant others. That number is around about 33% of our students within our MBA program. The Sloan Fellows program is a little higher because those are individuals who have a little bit more years of work experience. And they're, about 15 years in their career. So they're coming in with multiple children. So that number is slightly higher. So we do have a strong community of those who are applying with their significant other, as well as coming in with a significant other. So in the application, like I mentioned, you can indicate if your significant other is applying, as well as which round they're applying. We'll do our best to review you both on an individual merit, but we'll have that, context of there's two people applying within this particular household. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're going through the process. For some odd reason, most significant others don't apply the same round. So some may apply round one, and then the other one gets the courage to apply maybe round two or round three. So that does happen. So just let us know that on your particular application, so we are aware that there is a significant other that is applying. Also, if you don't know at the time that you submit your application that your significant other is applying, and you ultimately get that letter of admission, you can let us know at a later point if your significant other does choose to apply, and we can add that note to your particular record as well.